I'm Isaac Flores, 46, and this story begins on a Friday afternoon in my office at Kelmore Legal, a prestigious downtown Denver law firm. I'd spent 8 years building a software system that saved the company millions of dollars, never crashed, never left lawyers scrambling in the middle of a critical deadline. But as I was saving my work that day, the new CTO, Trevor Walsh, stood in the office doorway, tablet in hand, and coolly announced, "Your system is outdated, Isaac. We're moving to Verdant Legal Pro, the industry's leading cloud solution. Your job is done by the end of the week." I looked at him, trying to stay calm. Verdant Legal Pro. I repeated, for big companies in Denver like Boeing and Lockheed. Right? He nodded, didn't bother to sit down, and left. But inside me, a sense of unease was rising. I know these industry-leading systems. I've seen them fail, crippling other law firms at critical moments. And I know mine has never failed. Not once. To help you understand why this is important, let me tell you about my journey. 8 years ago, I joined Kelmore Legal after my startup failed. We had been building inventory management software for small manufacturers, but when funding dried up, I needed a steady job. Law firms were ideal, they paid well, and demanded tangible results. In my first week, I watched 3 lawyers lose an entire day of work because the old system corrupted a case file. Virginia Kelmore, the company's founder, called me into her office and asked, "Isaac, can you build something better? Something that doesn't crash when we need it most?" I made no empty promises. I spent 6 months observing how lawyers actually work, not how they talk, but how they struggle through late nights, impossible deadlines, and relentless pressure. I built a system with backups, the ability to work offline, and an interface so simple that even if you're exhausted, you can still use it. My system proved its worth on the Hartwell merger, a case with 47 lawyers, 200,000 documents, and 18 months of legal discovery. It tracked every minute, every expense, every email. When a client questioned a $3 million bill, I generated a report down to 6-minute intervals. They paid without dispute. It saved our day in the federal investigation of aerospace dynamics, when the government asked for 3 years of minute-by-minute billing reports. I delivered the report in less than 10 minutes. Other law firms tried to lure me. Software companies wanted to buy the source code, but Virginia doubled my salary and gave me equity. "Your family," she said. But then Virginia retired. Her son David took over, and Trevor Walsh, a Harvard graduate with a Silicon Valley mindset, became CTO. Trevor didn't care about what worked. He wanted to innovate, to disrupt, and my system, while perfect, wasn't modern enough in his eyes. When Trevor announced the move to Verdant Legal Pro, I wasn't surprised. I'd seen the signs. My access to financial reports was restricted. In-person meetings with management were replaced by monthly schedules, and any suggestions for system improvements were rejected under the pretext of a comprehensive review. I thought I'd have time to convince them, but I was wrong. Trevor hired consultants from McKinsey to audit the system. They interviewed people, reviewed documents for 3 weeks, and produced a report that I was not allowed to read. Apparently, the report recommended moving to a best-in-class cloud solution. I was called into the office and told that Verdant Legal had its own implementation team, so I was no longer needed. "Nothing personal," Isaac Trevor said before leaving. "This is just the evolution of business." I nodded, but in my head I knew what was in store for them. I had seen other law firms move to the cloud only to call in the middle of the night because of lost data system crashes or inability to generate reports for legal deadlines. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a business card that had been printed 2 years ago, but never used. Isaac Flores, independent software consultant. I had always planned to go into business for myself, and while the timing was not my choice, the destination was the same. I cleared out my office, looking out at the Denver skyline, glass and steel buildings rising toward the Rocky Mountains. I wasn't bitter. In this business, everything is temporary. Projects in, systems are replaced, people leave. But I knew something Trevor didn't: the limitations of cloud providers, their weaknesses, how their support works. I was ready. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a coffee shop near my apartment updating my resume and catching up with old colleagues. Work. The consultation was taking shape, but I was in no hurry. I had enough savings to last a few months. Then the phone rang. "Isaac, it's Jennifer from Kelmore Legal. Are you free?" Jennifer was a smart veteran paralegal who respected her support staff. "Sure," I said. "How's it going?" "Not good," she said. "There's a problem with the new system. A big problem." I put down my coffee. "What kind of problem?" "It lost all the billing data for the Morrison case. 3 months of work gone. Trial starts on Monday, and we need those reports as evidence." The Morrison case was a large class action, bringing in steady revenue for 2 years. My system had kept perfect track of every detail. "Have you contacted Verdant Legal Support?" I asked. "It's been 6 hours," Jennifer said. "They said they were working on it, but there was no time frame." "Trevor, well, he's having a rough day." I could picture it. With my system, it would take 5 minutes, restore a backup check, and you're done. But Verdant Legal worked differently. Their support was in India, the backup process was automated and opaque. When things went wrong, the client just waited. "What does the company need from me?" I asked. "The manager wants you to help as a consultant temporarily to get this sorted out." I paused. "And Trevor is focused on Verdant Legal. It's a separate contract, business continuity consulting." I smiled. Business continuity consulting, a polite way of saying they needed me to clean up the mess. "My consulting fee is $300 an hour," I said. "No problem. When can you start? I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I arrived at Kelmore Legal, the office was different. The usual afternoon energy was gone. People were huddled around screens, typing furiously or whispering into phones. I recognized the atmosphere from the startup-era crisis management mode. Jennifer greeted me at the front desk. "Thank God you're here. This is worse than I thought." She led me to a conference room where my old workstation had remained, a wise decision someone had made before the system was switched. "What's the status?" I asked. "Verdant Legal says there's no data loss, just temporary inaccessibility due to a sync error. They estimated a full recovery in 4 to 6 hours, but we don't have that. Judge Patterson wants the bill reported by 5 p.m. tomorrow, or there will be a discovery violation." I logged into the old system. Everything was exactly as it had been 3 weeks earlier. Full billing data for the Morrison case, detailed time tracking, expense allocations. Document links all intact and ready. "I can generate a report for Judge Patterson in about 10 minutes, I said. "Go ahead," Jennifer replied. As the system processed, I heard loud voices from the hallway. Through the conference room glass door, I saw Trevor Walsh pacing his office phone pressed to his ear, gesturing vigorously, as if arguing with someone. The Morrison billing report was complete: 18 months of work, 847 attorney hours, 342 paralegal hours, $156,000 in expenses, recorded formatted as the court required. I printed 3 copies and handed them to Jennifer. "This is incredible," she said, flipping through the pages. "Verdant Legal said it took 2 days just to figure out where the data went." "The architecture is different," I explained. "My system stores everything locally with real-time cloud backups. Their system processes everything in the cloud first, then caches it locally. When the cloud connection fails, everything goes down." Jennifer nodded. "Can you fix their system?" "I can't fix their system," I said, "but I can do a parallel restore of any case files that existed before the conversion." "How much?" she asked. $300 an hour plus expenses." "Okay." She left to deliver the report, and I began to assess the scope of the problem. My old system contained complete data, for 247 active cases. 1. 847 closed cases, and about 400,000 billing entries spanning 8 years, all perfectly organized and instantly accessible. Meanwhile, Verdant Legal had only managed to migrate 60% of the data before running into unforeseen integration complications, as their tech support called them. 20 minutes later, Trevor appeared at the door. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Isaac, I hear you're helping with the Morrison case. Interim consulting, I replied. Business continuity support. Good, he said. We appreciate your assistance during this transition. Transition. As if this was the plan, not a total system failure. How long does it take for Verdant Legal to get everything back up and running, I asked. They're confident that full functionality will be restored in 48 hours, just the usual disruptions of a migration, growing pains. I nodded politely. Trevor clearly believed what he was saying, but my experience was that when a vendor cloud level says 48 hours in a crisis, real time is usually weeks. In the meantime, Trevor continued, perhaps you could help with some other data recovery tasks just to keep things moving while Verdant Legal finalizes its optimization process. Of course, I said. What do you need monthly billing statements for all active cases? Client billing data for the last quarter. He paused, looking uncomfortable. And the partner accounting report for the year-end audit. The partner accounting report, the firm's most complex and sensitive data, determining how profits are divided among the founding partners. If Verdant Legal corrupted that data, Trevor would face not just an operational crisis, but a revolt from the firm's owners. I can have a preliminary report ready by tomorrow morning, I said. Excellent, Trevor replied. And Isaac, I appreciate your professionalism in this situation. I know the transition is difficult for everyone. After he left, I opened my laptop and began to write down everything, every request, every deadline, every promise Verdant Legal made, and how they failed. Trevor might think this was a temporary disruption, but I suspected we were just getting started. That night, I spent 4 hours recreating the financial statements that Verdant Legal had corrupted during the transition. What I discovered was worse than simple data loss. It was systemic incompetence. Verdant Legal had moved the easy data. First, client contact information, basic case files, simple billing entries. But they had completely failed to understand the complex relationships between the data. Partner profit allocations were based on a weighted formula that took into account hours worked, client origination credits, expense management, and seniority factors. My system automates these calculations using a custom algorithm developed over 8 years. Verdant Legal's system treats each data point as a standalone, destroying the mathematical relationships that make the calculations possible. Worse, they deleted some of my custom fields as non-standard, permanently losing metrics like client satisfaction scores, case complexity ratings, and performance measures. I called Jennifer at 8 p.m. How bad is it really? Very bad, she replied. Verdant Legal pushed back the timeline again. Now they're saying 5 to 7 business days for a full recovery. Trevor is in an emergency meeting with management and founding partners. There are rumors of hiring a forensic data recovery expert. What about the Morrison deadline? Your report saved us. Judge Patterson accepted it without question, but Trevor tells everyone that Verdant Legal provided the data, not you. Interesting. Trevor took credit for my work while handling the crisis he had caused. Jennifer, I need to ask you something confidential. Before the migration, did anyone from Verdant Legal test their system with our data? No, that I know of, she replied. They said their migration tool has been proven with thousands of law firms. Did they send someone to understand our custom workflow? No. They said everything would be handled remotely, just as I suspected. Verdant Legal had sold Trevor a standard package and convinced him that our unique requirements would fit into their general solution. It was like ordering a suit from a catalog. One more question, I said. How much does Kelmore pay Verdant Legal each year? I'm not supposed to know, Jennifer said, but I handle the billing. $800,000 a year plus implementation costs. $800,000. My old salary was $120,000 plus benefits and equity. They were paying Verdant Legal 6 times what I was for a system that didn't work. Isaac, can I ask you something? Could your old system handle everything we're trying to do with Verdant Legal? It handled everything for 8 years, I replied. So why did Trevor replace it? It was a question I asked myself every week. Trevor wasn't stupid. His resume was impressive. Harvard consulting experience at top firms, successful technology implementations at previous companies. So why did he make this disastrous decision? The answer came when I looked at the Verdant legal contract terms that Jennifer had secretly shared with me. Trevor wasn't just buying software. He was buying a relationship. Verdant Legal was owned by Strategian Consulting, Trevor's old company. His former colleagues were now vendors. It wasn't about the technology, it was about Trevor proving he could bring a big solution to a mid-sized law firm. My system worked too well, invisible, reliable, and boring. Trevor needed something that looked impressive in a PowerPoint presentation. Unfortunately for him, the partners were more interested in the quarterly profit distributions my system generated than the flashy features Verdant Legal promised. The next morning, I arrived at Kelmore with 3 sets of printed reports and a proposal that could change everything. Jennifer met me at the elevator. Trevor has been here since 6 a.m. Verdant Legal has pushed it back again now 2 weeks to recover the data. The partners are furious. What about the quarterly profit distribution? That's why they need you. Verdant Legal says their system can't replicate your profit distribution formula without major custom development, 6 months, and an additional $300,000 in consulting fees. 6 months. By then, the partners will have missed out on profit distribution altogether, reason enough to dissolve the management agreement and find new leadership. Did anyone tell the partners that my system can generate reports now? That's why I called you yesterday, Jennifer said. The manager specifically asked you to come to the meeting. I walked into the main conference room at 10 a.m., carrying my laptop and printed report. 8 partners sat around a mahogany table, Trevor at the end of the table, looking like he was facing a firing squad. Isaac David Kelmore, the manager, stood up and shook my hand. Thank you for coming. We know you're helping with some temporary technical difficulties. I'm here to help in any way, I replied. Trevor cleared his throat. Isaac has been excellent in assisting with the transition to Verdant Legal. The data recovery process has been more complex than anticipated, but we're confident that full functionality will be restored soon. How soon? Patricia Santos, a founding partner, asked. Verdant Legal estimates 2 weeks for a full system recovery, Trevor replied. However, they were able to provide basic functionality immediately, and Isaac has created an interim report using the archived data. An interim report, another partner echoed. What exactly? I placed the profit allocation report on the table. Here's the full profit distribution for the quarter calculated using the same formula we've used for the past 8 years. Every hour worked, every expense allocation, every customer origination credit, the data is complete and accurate. David picked up the report and flipped through it. It's exactly the same as last quarter. Because it is, I said. Same system, same calculations, same data sources. But I thought your system was outdated, Patricia said. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. The strategic decision to move to Verdant Legal was based on long-term scalability and integration. Trevor David said quietly, help me understand. You replaced a system that worked perfectly with one that didn't work at all. And now, we're paying Isaac triple his old salary to reproduce a report that his old system automatically generated. I opened my laptop and hooked it up to the projector. Verdant Legal's client list is publicly available on their website. They serve 47 law firms nationwide. The largest has 32 lawyers. Kelmore Legal has 68 lawyers. They're implementing a system designed for a firm less than half ours. The room was dead silent. David leaned forward. Isaac, how much would it cost to restore the original system to the main platform? I need to assess the current infrastructure, I said, but I'm estimating 40 hours of work at a consulting fee. Then I'd recommend a maintenance contract to avoid future disruptions. And the consulting fee is $300 an hour, David said. Trevor paled. The vote was quick. 8 partners, 8 hands raised in favor of terminating the Verdant legal contract and restoring my system. I plugged my laptop into the main server and began the restore. 8 years of work carefully stored on backup drives began to flow back into the company's infrastructure. Database connections were reestablished, custom workflows, reactivated integration points with accounting document management, and the customer portal came back online. How long will it take? David asked. 4 hours to fully restore, another 2 hours to test and verify. Then we'll be fully operational, no better than before. I've been working on improvements for the past 3 weeks. Trevor stood up abruptly. I need to make a few calls about termination procedures. After he left, Patricia looked at me. Isaac, we owe you an apology. Letting Trevor remove you was a huge mistake. I understand, I said. Change is hard to evaluate when you're not familiar with the technical details. Have you considered coming back as a full-time employee? Patricia asked. I looked around the conference room. 3 weeks ago, I was shunned as an obsolete relic. Now they want me back as a savior. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I think consulting is a better fit. The firm has a reliable system without the expense of a full-time employee. I have the freedom to work with multiple clients. Multiple clients, David asked. 3 other law firms contacted me this week, I replied. Word travels fast when the law firm has a system failure. 6 months later, Kelmore Legal settled a breach of contract lawsuit with Verdant Legal for $200,000. Trevor resigned, moving to a smaller firm in Phoenix. My consulting business grew, serving 12 law firms in Colorado and Wyoming. The demand for a reliable custom system was greater than I thought. Apparently, many firms were having their Verdant legal moment with cloud providers. Cloud. One day while I was working in my home office, David Kelmore called. Isaac, I want to give you an update on profit distribution. We just finished the best quarter in the company's history. The efficiency improvements you added to our recovery system increased our hours tracked by 12%. Great news, I said. One more thing, he continued. We're opening a second office in Boulder. Would you like to build an integrated system for both locations? Sure, I said. What's the timeline? We want to start planning next month. And Isaac, this time, you'll report directly to me. No middleman. After I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer. The new CTO starts today. The first thing he asked was if you were willing to consult on system architecture. I told him, your rate is now $500 an hour. He didn't blink. $500 an hour. Fair market value for expertise that can't be replaced by a generic solution. I opened my laptop and started working on the Boulder integration spec. Some problems require custom solutions built by people who understand the difference between working and working well. The market eventually realized that. I didn't stop in Boulder. My consulting work took me to law firms in Cheyenne, Fort Collins, even a small firm in Laramie. Each had its own story. A failed cloud solution, an overconfident CTO, or a partner who didn't understand the value of a legacy system until it was gone. I remember a case in Cheyenne where a law firm lost billing data for a major environmental lawsuit. They called me at 10 p.m. begging for help. I arrived, restored the data from a local backup they didn't know they had, and created a report before dawn. The managing partner, a 60-year-old man named George, grabbed my hand and said, Isaac, you're a lifesaver. I told the team not to throw away the old system, but they wouldn't listen. George is now a regular customer and his company pays an annual maintenance fee to ensure that the mistake doesn't happen again. Stories like this make me think. In the tech industry, we often get caught up in the shiny promises of the future cloud AI automation. But that future is meaningless if it doesn't solve real problems. I once worked with a company in Colorado Springs where the new CTO, a young woman named Emily, was trying to replace the internal accounting system with a cloud solution. She believed that the old system, while reliable, wasn't modern enough to impress the board. The result: the new system couldn't handle complex federal transactions, costing the company $400,000 in one quarter due to billing errors. Emily called me and we spent 3 weeks restoring the old system and building a lightweight cloud integration layer to meet the board's needs. Emily learned a lesson: innovation doesn't mean tearing down what's working. My story isn't just about technology, it's about knowing your value. When Trevor fired me, I could have been desperate begging to keep my job. But I knew what my system was worth, and I knew the market wanted it. I documented every contribution from the report that saved Morrison to the 12% efficiency improvement. When Kelmore called me back, I negotiated from a position of strength, not defeat. And when other companies called, I priced my expertise at what it was worth, $500 an hour, and they paid without hesitation. Let me share another story to show you how common this is. A friend of mine, Maria, works for a law firm in Albuquerque. She built an internal document management system that gave lawyers access to case files in seconds. Last year, a new CTO decided to switch to an industry-leading cloud solution. The result: the new system was slow as hell, and during a major trial, lawyers couldn't access important documents. Maria, who had left to start her own business, was called back at a rate of $400 an hour. She got the old system back in 2 days and now runs a consulting firm that serves 6 law firms in New Mexico. Maria and I like to joke that we should thank CTOs like Trevor; they keep us busy. But it wasn't always easy. There were nights when I sat alone wondering if I had done something wrong by not fighting harder to keep the system in place at Kelmore. I remember one time, about 2 months after I left Kelmore, I got an email from a former lawyer, Robert, who had relied on my system for big cases. He wrote, "Isaac, the firm is in chaos. The new system is a nightmare. Would you consider coming back?" I replied that I was available to consult but not full-time. Robert understood, but his email reminded me that my efforts had made a difference. It gave me the motivation to keep going. Now, my consulting work is more than just fixing other people's mistakes. I help law firms build G systems that work for them, not what the big vendors advertise. Last week, I signed a contract with a firm in Casper, Wyoming, that had just lost case data because a cloud provider cut corners. I spent the day with the lawyers listening to them talk about how their systems had crashed in the middle of the night, causing them to miss court deadlines. I built a system with local backups, military-grade encryption, and an interface as simple as a notes app on your phone. When we launched the managing partner, a woman named Helen invited me to dinner at a local steakhouse. "Isaac," she said, "you didn't just save our firm. You reminded us that technology should serve people, not the other way around." Over the next few months, my consulting work was busier than ever. After the contract with the law firm in Casper, I got a call from another firm in Grand Junction, Colorado. They had just gone through a similar crisis to Kelmore, switching to an industry-leading cloud solution without proper testing, only to lose the billing data for a major real estate lawsuit. The managing partner, a man named Charles, practically begged me over the phone. "Isaac, we heard about you from Helen and Casper. Our system crashed and we have a court deadline next week. Can you help?" I agreed to fly to Grand Junction the next day, bringing my laptop and a hard drive containing the data recovery tools I had developed over the years. When I arrived, I found their office to be identical to Kelmore in crisis mode. Stressed out attorneys, paralegals running back and forth with stacks of paper, and the air heavy with fear of missed deadlines. Charles ushered me into a small conference room where their old server had been retained, a lucky decision as was Kelmore. The new cloud system lost the billing data from a $5 million lawsuit, he explained. The vendor said they would restore it in 3 days, but we don't have 3 days. The court needs the report by Wednesday. I checked the old server and found that the data was intact, just reactivating the previous system. Within 2 hours, I had generated a full billing report down to the minute, and Charles almost hugged me when I handed him the printout. Isaac, you have no idea what a disaster you just saved us from, he said. I smiled. I've seen this happen a few times. But the story in Grand Junction didn't end there. As I dug deeper into their system, I discovered that the cloud provider had not only lost the data, but had also accidentally deleted custom fields used to track expenses related to complex real estate lawsuits. These fields, which the company had been developing for more than a decade, were key to their ability to win cases by proving their costs were reasonable in court. Without them, their lawyers would have to do the work manually, losing hundreds of billable hours. I propose not only restoring the old system, but also building an upgraded version that incorporated some of the secure cloud features I had tested on other projects. Charles agreed immediately, and we signed a long-term consulting contract for me to oversee the implementation. While I was working in Grand Junction, I received an email from Jennifer at Kelmore Legal. Isaac, you wouldn't believe this, she wrote. Trevor just contacted David asking to come back as a consultant on a new technology project. David flatly refused, saying he was the only one we trusted to do this. I laughed as I read the email. Trevor, for all his confidence, had not learned his lesson, but Jennifer's message also reminded me that my reputation was growing. Law firms were starting to call me the system fixer, a moniker I didn't entirely like but didn't reject. After all, that's what I did, fixing the mistakes of overconfident CTOs. One evening, as I dined alone at a restaurant in Grand Junction, overlooking the Colorado River sparkling under the streetlights, Charles sat down at my table with a bottle of wine. Isaac, I want to thank you not only for saving the case, but also for reminding us of what's important, he said. We were so caught up in this idea that everything had to be modern, that everything had to be cloud, that everything had to be industry standard. But you showed us that what worked was what mattered. We raised our glasses, and I told him about Kelmore, about how I'd built the system from scratch and how it had been scrapped because it wasn't fancy enough. Charles nodded. I worked with a CTO like Trevor at my previous company, he says. He spent $2 million on a new ERP system only to have it crash in the first quarter. We lost a major customer because we couldn't deliver on time. Charles' story got me thinking, why do companies keep making this mistake? Why do they underestimate what's working in order to keep up with the times? Uncertain promises. I began to dig deeper into the issue, not just out of curiosity, but to improve my consulting practice. I read industry reports like a 2024 study from Forrester, which found that 70% of cloud transformation projects fail because of a lack of due diligence or a lack of understanding of the company's specific needs. I also talked to former startup colleagues who were now working at large tech companies. One friend, Tom, now a lead engineer at a Seattle-based company, told me about the time his company tried to replace an internal system with a cloud solution. Isaac, it sounds like your story, he said over Zoom. The old system wasn't pretty, but it worked. The new system looked great in the demo, but when we launched, it couldn't handle our volume. We lost $1 million in revenue before we went back to the old system. Tom and I laughed, but there was frustration behind it. These mistakes weren't just costly. They hurt people. Employees who lost their jobs. Customers who were hurt, lawyers, like the one in Kelmore who had to work all night to fix the disaster. Back in Denver, I started getting invited to speak at local tech conferences. One in Boulder, hosted by the Colorado Technology Association, asked me to share my story in a session titled Innovation or Reliability, which is the future. I'm not a big fan of getting up in front of a crowd, but I saw this as an opportunity to get my message across. In my talk, I told Kelmore, but I made it more personal by sharing the story of a lawyer at the firm, Ellen, who cried in my office when the Verdant legal system lost the data she needed to defend a client in a tense divorce case. Ellen doesn't care if it's cloud or not, I told the audience. She just wants her data to work when it needs to. I ended my talk with a call to arms. Don't let the flashiness blind you. Test. Listen to your team and appreciate what works. After the talk, dozens of people came up to shake my hand, sharing their stories of systems that had been replaced wrongly. A woman named Linda, told me about the time her insurance company lost claims data because of an untested cloud solution. Isaac Rears, wish you were there, she said. It took us months to recover. These interactions inspired me to expand my consulting practice. I began offering workshops to law firms teaching them how to evaluate technology solutions before signing million-dollar contracts. In a workshop in Fort Collins, I worked with a small law firm of just 15 lawyers. They were considering switching to a cloud provider because their CTO, a young man named Brian, believed their current internal system was too old. I asked them to run a real-world test, simulating a busy work week with the new system. The result: the cloud system couldn't handle the custom reports the firm needed for commercial litigation. Brian, initially skeptical, admitted his mistake. I got caught up in the hype, he said. I won't make that mistake again. The firm kept the old system and I helped them upgrade it with some modern features like a mobile-friendly interface. The more firms I worked with, the more I realized that my story wasn't just about technology, it was about trust. Law firms relied on me not just because I could fix the system, but because I listened to them. I remember one time in Laramie when I worked with a family law firm. The managing partner, an older man named Frank, invited me for a beer after I had restored their system. Isaac, he said, you don't just fix computers. You understand what we're trying to protect our clients, our reputation. Frank told me about a client, a single mother, who relied on the firm to win a custody case. My old system gave them quick access to documents proving their case in court. If we had used the new cloud system, we probably would have lost, Frank said. Moments like that reminded me why I do this work. As my consulting business grew, I also began mentoring young engineers who wanted to avoid my path or Trevor's. A recent grad named Miguel, reached out to me on LinkedIn after hearing a talk in Boulder. He worked for a law firm in Pueblo and was worried that his CTO was pushing a cloud solution that wasn't right for him. I spent an afternoon coaching Miguel on how to make the case for keeping the current system using data and real-world examples. A month later, he sent me a text. Isaac, you were right. We ran a pilot and the new system failed. Your boss, hey, I'm listening to me now. Small victories, like Miguel's, made me feel like my work was more meaningful than fixing the system. But things didn't always go smoothly. One time, I took a job with a law firm in Durango whose CTO, a man named Richard, didn't trust me. He'd spent $1 million on a cloud solution and refused to admit it failed even when the case data disappeared. Richard treated me like a threat, restricting access to the system and demanding reports every step of the way. I persevered, working with the lawyers to restore the data from old backups and eventually producing a report that saved them from a court deadline. But Richard never thanked me. Instead, he told management that he had backed me up. I didn't mind. The lawyers knew the truth, and the firm is now a regular client. The experience taught me that not everyone will appreciate your hard work, but that not detract from its value. Now, as I sit in my home office in Denver, looking out at the snow-capped Rocky Mountains, I feel good. My job isn't just to fix systems. It's to build trust, protect what matters, and prove that reliability trumps trends. My phone buzzes with a text from David Kelmore. Isaac, the Boulder office is ready. Can you come in next week to start integration? And by the way, our new partner wants to meet you. They hear you're a miracle worker. I reply, I'll be there. And the rate is $600 an hour. David responds promptly, worth every penny. My work in Boulder began with a meeting at Kelmore Legal's new office, a modern space in the heart of downtown, with views of rolling green hills and bustling Pearl Street. David Kelmore personally gave me a tour pointing out the glass walls and walnut desks designed to impress high-end clients. Isaac, he said, we want this office to be a model of innovation, but not Trevor's kind of innovation. We want innovation based on trust, and that's why you're here. I nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility. This was more than just a systems integration project. It was an opportunity to reshape how a modern law firm operates while maintaining the stability lawyers need to win cases. I spent my first week in Boulder meeting with attorneys and paralegals, listening to their needs. A young attorney, Sarah, told me about the time she almost lost a case because her previous firm's legacy system couldn't access documents during an online trial. Isaac: I need a system I can trust whether I'm in the courtroom or working remotely from a coffee shop, she said. Stories like Sarah's helped me design a system that combined the local power of Kelmore's legacy system with select cloud features like real-time syncing for shared documents. I also added an extra layer of security using AES 256 encryption to protect client data from attacks. Cybersecurity, a growing concern after a Colorado Springs law firm was hacked last year, exposing the sensitive information of hundreds of clients. While working in Boulder, I received an unexpected call from Patricia Santos, one of Kelmore's founding partners. Isaac, we're considering opening a third office in Cheyenne, Wyoming, she said. After what you've done in Denver and Boulder, we want you to be involved from the start. How about designing a system that integrates all three locations? I was a little taken aback. Cheyenne is a smaller market, but the law firms there handle large oil, gas, and mining-related cases that require absolute precision in tracking invoices and documents. I'd love to, I replied, but I'd need to meet with the team in Cheyenne to understand their specific needs. Patricia agreed, and we planned a trip for the following month. The opportunity made me realize that my job wasn't just to fix the mistakes of the past, it was to build a future where law firms could thrive without fear of technology failing them. But not everything was smooth sailing. While I was finalizing the Boulder system, a problem arose in the Denver office. Jennifer sent me an urgent text, Isaac, we have a new lawsuit, a class action larger than Morrison, and the system is overloaded, trying to process data from 80 lawyers at once. I immediately returned to Denver and sat down with my tech team to analyze the problem. It turned out that the new lawsuit involved a pharmaceutical company accused of distributing defective drugs with over 300,000 documents and millions of billing items to track. My system, while reliable, was not optimized for such a massive amount of data in real time. This was the first time I felt like my system was challenged, and I couldn't let it fail. I worked through the night rewriting some algorithms to improve data processing performance. I also added a new feature, a real-time dashboard that allowed attorneys to see the progress of a case from hours worked to costs with a single click. When I presented the solution to David and his partners, they were not only impressed but offered to increase my consulting fee to $700 an hour. Isaac, you're not just keeping us on our toes, David said. You're taking us to the next level. The pharmaceutical case turned out to be a huge win for Kelmore, with my system tracking every detail perfectly, helping the company win a $12 million settlement for its client. Word spread, and I started getting calls from law firms outside Colorado, including one in Salt Lake City and one in Boise, Idaho. The Salt Lake City story is particularly memorable. The law firm Harper & Sons contacted me after its cloud system collapsed amid a major real estate litigation. The managing partner, a 70-year-old man named William Harper, invited me into his office, an old building with wooden bookshelves and the smell of old paper. "Isaac," he said, pouring me a cup of coffee, "we're a family-owned firm in business for over 50 years. We're not into flashy technology, but our new CTO convinced us to move to the cloud. Now we've lost data on the biggest lawsuit in the history of the firm." I asked if they kept a backup of the old system, and William led me into the basement where a dusty old server was still running. "We couldn't bear to throw it away," he laughed. "Over the course of 3 days, I restored the data, rebuilt the necessary reports, and added a modern interface so their young lawyers could access the data from their phones." William called me a tech wizard, and Harper and Sons became a lifelong client. These experiences led me to think more deeply about why companies keep making mistakes with technology. I began writing a book tentatively titled Trust in the Age of Innovation, based on my experiences and stories from clients. In one chapter, I tell the story of a Boise law firm I helped last year that spent $1.5 million on a cloud solution that was billed as automating the entire legal process. The result: the automated system incorrectly billed clients, causing the firm to underpay and almost be sued. I traveled to Boise, worked with their team to restore the old system, and added a layer of manual checks to ensure accuracy. The managing partner, a woman named Diane, said to me, "Isaac, you remind us that technology is a tool, not a master. My book is still in draft form, but I hope it will help firms avoid the mistakes of Kelmore or Harper and Sons." Meanwhile, my consulting business continued to expand. I hired an assistant, an information technology graduate named Emily, to help manage my schedule and handle initial client requests. Emily quickly became a valuable asset, not only because of her organizational skills, but also because of her ability to communicate with older lawyers who were often skeptical of technology. She once told me about a client in Cheyenne, a veteran partner named Margaret, who refused to use the new system because it was too complicated. Emily spent the day with Margaret, guiding her through the process, and at the end she sent me a thank you email. "Isaac, your young lady made me believe in technology for the first time in 30 years. Moments like that made me proud, not just for my work, but for the team I was building. But life wasn't all about work. One evening, I got a call from my mom, who lives in a small town near Pueblo. "Isaac," she said, her voice full of pride, "I tell my friends at book club that my son is a system fixer for big law firms. They want to know when you're going to write a book or make a TV show." I laughed out loud. The idea of a TV show seemed far-fetched, but it got me thinking about sharing my story more widely. I started a small YouTube channel, posting short videos about how law firms can avoid technology failures. One video titled "The Three Biggest Mistakes When Choosing a Cloud Solution" unexpectedly got 50,000 views, mostly from lawyers and law firm managers across the country. One comment read, "Isaac, I wish my boss had seen this video before we spent $2 million on a useless system." Such feedback kept me posting, even though filming in my home office at 11 p.m. wasn't always fun. My story in Kelmore has now become part of Colorado legal lore. Once at a conference in Denver, a young lawyer approached me and said, "You're Isaac Flores, right?" I learned about the Kelmore case in law school. They called it the Verdant legal disaster in law firm management class. I laugh, but I also feel a little proud. My system, once called outdated, is now a lesson for future generations of lawyers. But I don't rest on my laurels. Every day brings new challenges from a law firm in Missoula, Montana that needs to recover data from a ransomware attack to a company in Lincoln, Nebraska that wants to integrate their system with a new AI platform without sacrificing reliability. One of the most interesting recent projects was with a law firm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They contacted me after their cloud system failed to handle water rights lawsuits, a complex issue in the American Southwest. The managing partner, a woman named Clara, told me about the time they almost lost a case because the system couldn't generate a detailed report on a client's water usage history. Isaac, she said, we don't need fancy technology. We needed something that worked when our clients' farmers, indigenous peoples, were depending on us. I spent 2 months in Santa Fe building a custom system with data fields specific to water litigation, like ownership history and flow measurements. When the system launched, Clara threw a small party in the office with homemade tamales and a thank you speech for me in front of the entire staff. Isaac Flores, she said, raising a glass of wine, you are proof that the best technology is technology that understands people. I blushed, not used to such attention, but the moment reminded me why I love this job. Now, as my consulting business continues to grow, I'm starting to think about my legacy. I don't want to just be the guy who fixes the system. I want to change the way law firms think about technology, encouraging them to prioritize reliability and listen to their teams. I'm working with a university in Denver to develop a short course on technology management for lawyers in the hope of inspiring the next generation to avoid mistakes like Trevor's. Meanwhile, I'm still taking on new contracts from a law firm in Rapid City, South Dakota, to one in Flagstaff, Arizona. Each project is an opportunity to prove that reliability never goes out of style and that true value lies in building something that serves people, not just follows trends. As I continue my journey, each new project brings me an opportunity to reinforce my belief that reliability trumps flashiness. After the project in Santa Fe, I got a call from a law firm in Rapid City, South Dakota, a small town in the shadow of the Black Hills. The caller was Susan, a managing partner, in a deep, concerned voice. Isaac, we heard about you from Clara in Santa Fe, she said. Our new cloud system just lost data for a major mineral rights lawsuit. We have a preliminary hearing in 5 days, and if we don't get our billing statement, we could lose our biggest client. I was used to urgent calls like this, but this time there was something different. Susan revealed that her firm represented an indigenous community fighting to protect their land from a mining company. This isn't just about money, Isaac, she said. This is about protecting their heritage. Her words hit me, and I promised to be in Rapid City the next morning. When I arrived, the law firm's office, a modest brick building on a quiet street, was filled with tension. Attorneys were poring over piles of paperwork, while paralegals tried to contact the cloud provider's support team to no avail. Susan led me to a corner of the office where their old server still sat covered in a thin layer of dust. We don't have a budget like Kelmore, she admitted, but we were hoping you could do something. I checked the server and found that the billing data was still intact, just a matter of reactivating the old system. In 4 hours, I generated the necessary reports detailing every expense related to the mineral lawsuit. Susan scanned the printouts, her eyes shining with relief. Isaac, you didn't just save the case, she said. You gave us the opportunity to continue fighting for our client. But the work in Rapid City didn't stop there. As I dug deeper into their system, I discovered that the cloud provider had not only lost the data, but had also misformatted fields related to land use rights, which are key in Native community lawsuits. These fields contain decades of historical treaty and ownership information. Losing them meant the company had to spend months recreating the data from documents paper trail, a nearly impossible task with the court deadline looming. I proposed not only restoring the old system, but also building a custom database to store and quickly access land-related information. Susan readily agreed despite their tight budget. To help them, I reduced my consulting fee to $500 an hour and committed to completing the project in 2 weeks. While in Rapid City, I met with members of the indigenous communities the firm represented. One evening, Susan invited me to a community meeting at the local cultural center where elders shared their land stories. An older man named Raymond, with his silver hair tied back, took my hand and said, "We hear you're the one who keeps the lawyers going. Thank you, because that's how you keep our ancestral land." His words made me realize that my job wasn't just to fix systems, it was to support real people who relied on law firms to protect their rights. I returned to the office with renewed motivation, working late into the night to perfect the database. When the system launched, Susan held an office snack of local fry bread and coffee, a small but meaningful gesture. "Isaac, you're part of this story now," she said. The Rapid City project brought in another unexpected client. While I was there, a smaller law firm in Sioux Falls heard about my work and got in touch. They were facing a similar problem. A new cloud solution had lost data for a major insurance case, and their vendor couldn't restore it before the court deadline. I drove overnight to Sioux Falls, carrying the hard drive containing my recovery tools. Their office was in an old strip mall with worn carpets and the smell of burnt coffee. The managing partner, a man named Carl, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Isaac, we're a small company, but we fight for the voiceless," he said. "This system is our lifeblood, and now it's dying." I checked their old system, which was hosted on an outdated server in a cramped room. Fortunately, the data was intact, and I recovered the necessary reports in 6 hours. Carl was on the verge of tears when I handed him the printout. "Isaac, you're an angel," he said, half joking. But the story in Sioux Falls took a turn. As I was leaving, Carl revealed that their CTO, a young man named Ethan, had refused to admit his mistake in choosing the cloud. Ethan even tried to blame Carl for not investing enough in technology. I saw this as an opportunity to not only fix the system, but also help the company avoid repeating the same mistake. I suggested a meeting with the entire team, including Ethan, to explain why the cloud system failed and how the legacy system could be upgraded to meet modern needs. During the meeting, I presented in a gentle but clear manner, using examples from Kelmore and Rapid City. I pointed out that their cloud solution had not been tested with real data and lacked the custom fields needed for insurance claims. Ethan was initially defensive, but when I showed him that the legacy system could generate reports 5 times faster than the cloud system, he began to listen. At the end of the meeting, Ethan approached me and said, "Isaac, I was wrong. I thought the cloud was the answer to everything. Can you walk me through how to do it right?" I agreed to mentor Ethan for a few months, helping him develop a technology strategy that combined local reliability with selective cloud capabilities. Sioux Falls became a success story, not just because I fixed the system, but because I helped build a team that understood the value of testing and listening. Back in Denver, I received an unexpected call from a nonprofit in Fort Collins that provides free legal services to low-income families. The head of the organization, a woman named Laura, contacted me after reading an article about my work in the local newspaper. "Isaac, we don't have a huge budget," she said, "but our case management system keeps crashing, and that's keeping us from helping our clients properly. Can you do something about it? I usually charge a lot, but Laura's story touched me." I agreed to work for a reduced fee of $200 an hour and spent a month in Fort Collins building a simple but robust system. The new system allowed attorneys to access case files from mobile devices, an important feature since many of them worked in mobile courtrooms or temporary offices. When the system launched, Laura invited me to a fundraising event for the organization where I met one of their clients. A single mother named Maria told me about how the organization helped her keep her home after being threatened with foreclosure. "Without your lawyers and your system, my kids and I would be on the street," she said, tears streaming down her face. That moment reminded me that my job is about more than code and servers. It's about making a real impact. While working with the nonprofit, I received an email from David Kelmore. "Isaac, we just signed a contract with a large client in Cheyenne, and they want a system similar to Boulder's. Can you start next month?" I agreed, but I also offered something new: a long-term maintenance contract for all 3 of Kelmore's offices at $800 an hour for major upgrades. David responded immediately, "Go for it, Isaac. You're worth every penny." This contract marked a milestone. My consulting firm was now more than a one-man operation. It was a real business with a growing client list and a growing reputation. But growth also brought challenges. I began to realize that I couldn't handle every project on my own. One night while working late on a system for a company in Missoula, I realized that I had missed a family dinner with my mother and siblings in Pueblo. I called my mother to apologize and she laughed. "Isaac, you're doing great, but don't forget to live a little," she said. Her advice got me thinking. I decided to expand the team, hiring a software engineer, a young man named Daniel, who had worked for a tech company in Denver. Daniel quickly proved his worth handling smaller projects, while I focused on the big contracts. He also brought a new perspective, suggesting using data analytics to help law firms predict workloads and optimize billing. The idea was first tested at a firm in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the results were astounding. They increased billing tracking efficiency by 15%, resulting in $200,000 in additional revenue in one quarter. My team's success wasn't just about money, it was about creating a legacy. I started hosting internal training sessions teaching Daniel and Emily not just how to fix the system, but how to listen to clients and understand their real needs. Once, when we were working with a law firm in Flagstaff, Arizona, Emily noticed that their lawyers were struggling to access data from satellite offices in rural areas. She proposed an offline solution using encrypted hard drives to store data locally in remote locations. The idea was a huge success, and the Flagstaff company now calls Emily its Golden Girl. I've watched with pride as my team has grown from technicians to real problem solvers. As my consulting business has grown, I've found myself not just building systems, but also building networks, people stories, and lessons that connect from small towns like Rapid City to big cities like Denver. One morning, while I was checking email in my home office, I received a text from Clara in Santa Fe. "Isaac, you wouldn't believe this," she wrote. "We just won the largest water rights case in the history of our company, and your system was the main reason. The reports you produced convinced the judge that our client had a legal right to the water. We'd like to invite you to Santa Fe to celebrate." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the invitation. I replied that I would try to find the time, but deep down I knew this victory was not just mine. It belonged to Clara, her lawyers, and the farmers who depended on them to protect their livelihoods. Clara's invitation came just as I was preparing for a new project in Missoula, Montana. The law firm there, Thompson and Reed, had contacted me after a ransomware attack had locked down their entire cloud system. The managing partner, a man named Edward Thompson, called me at 7 a.m., his voice shaking. "Isaac, we were hacked 3 days ago. Our cloud provider says they can't recover the data unless we pay the ransom, but we can't. It's illegal and there's no guarantee. Can you help?" I had handled cyber attacks before, but this was the first time I dealt with a ransomware attack of this scale. I agreed to fly to Missoula that day, bringing with me a security toolkit I had developed, including data recovery software and encryption protocols. When I arrived at Thompson and Reed, their office was a chaotic scene. Lawyers sat around long tables reviewing paper documents while IT staff tried to contact the cloud provider over the phone. Edward greeted me at the door looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "Isaac, we're representing a coalition of small businesses in a lawsuit against a major food conglomerate," he explained. "The locked data contains key evidence for next month's trial. If we lose it, the case is over." I checked their systems and discovered that fortunately, they had a local backup on an offline hard drive created before the transfer to the cloud. The backup was incomplete, containing only 70% of the data needed, but it was a starting point. I spent the next 48 hours recovering the data using my tools to recreate the missing files based on patterns in the backup. As I handed Edward the evidence reports, he grabbed my shoulder. "Isaac, you're a miracle. I can't thank you enough." But Project Missoula wasn't just about data recovery. After addressing the immediate crisis, I proposed to Edward a long-term plan to protect the company from future attacks. I designed a hybrid system that combined local storage with military-grade encryption and a secure cloud backup layer controlled by the company itself, not a third-party provider. I also organized a training session for their IT staff, teaching them how to spot phishing emails and update their firewalls. One young IT employee, 10 days, we restored the data from local backups, beefed up security with multi-factor authentication, and created a report for the court. Thomas took me to a local steakhouse to thank me. Isaac, you didn't just save the case, he said, handing me a plate of corn dogs. He reminded us that technology should serve people, not the other way around. The Raleigh project led me to another client in Charleston, South Carolina, where a law firm was facing a similar crisis. The managing partner, a woman named Caroline, contacted me after hearing about my work in Raleigh. Isaac, our systems lost data for a historic property lawsuit, she said. We're representing a community that wants to protect a Civil War-era building. Can you help? I flew to Charleston, a city with cobblestone streets and the scent of jasmine in the air. I checked their systems and found a local backup on an old server. Over 7 days, I restored the data and created a detailed report on the building's historical value, helping the firm win the case and protect the community's heritage. Caroline hosted a dinner party at her home with lobster and corn pudding. Isaac, you are a gift from God, she said, handing me a book on Charleston history as a thank you gift. Projects like the one in Charleston remind me that my work is a never-ending journey. Every law firm, every case, every community I help is a new chapter in my story. I don't just build systems, I build trust, uphold justice, and demonstrate that trust is the foundation of all success. My consulting firm now serves more than 50 law firms across the country, from small towns like Rapid City to big cities like Portland and Raleigh. My fees are now $1,000 an hour, a figure that makes even the I was surprised, but clients paid without hesitation because they knew I brought irreplaceable value. As I sit in my new office looking out at the Rocky Mountains glistening in the sunset, I am grateful for the journey I have taken. From being called old-fashioned by Trevor Walsh to becoming the go-to guy for law firms across America, I have learned that true value lies in building something that serves people. If you are watching, I want you to ask yourself, what are you building? Will you stand up for it when it is looked down upon? And are you ready to prove your worth when the time comes? I did, and from Kelmore to Charleston, from Missoula to Portland, the market has recognized it. What is your story? Share it with me, and stay tuned for more lessons from costly mistakes and well-deserved victories.